Alrighty, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Nick Talks. So, weekly update time. I love when it comes down to this because I don't really have to think and plan and script a whole video. I just get to talk about what I think and what's going on. And it's works doubly great for me because then I get to go back and look through how I've been thinking about things and how I've evolved over time. You know, years down the line, I can get to basically a weekly journal of what I was thinking. I'd like to structure these a little bit more so that I have certain points that I want to hit, and at the end I can kind of just free riff, but not today. So, overall, doing pretty good. I don't really have any major negatives to point out, which is nice, except for it is becoming obvious that I need to lower my input from external sources. Mainly shorts, dude. Like, I don't have TikTok. I've never downloaded TikTok, but shorts is the same cancer that has invaded my consciousness. And it's so, you know, I don't get caught in hours of endless scrolling, but several series of 20-minute bursts is enough to just create so much fog in my mind. Like, there's this space behind my eyes that is occupied by all this information that I'm dumping. And, you know, the major benefit that I've found in the past of being more focused in what I'm learning and what I'm thinking about is that it's very clear. Like, if I'm only learning about diet, exercise, and habit formation and certain neural goals, right? If I'm learning about how I can improve cognition and ways to improve my training and ways to improve my diet for specific goals, then I can focus on these things specifically and then do that over time. And then I can even broad range, like when I was learning about like ancient human history and doing all these other things at the same time, I can map back and forth. And I've talked about this in the past, but I've fallen even further down the rabbit hole of having too much information. I've been binge watching CinemaSins, which is great. I love it. I literally cannot get enough. But, you know, those are 15 to 30 minute videos, and then watching multiple of those in a row, and then, you know, either in between or before or after, having a bunch of shorts, you know, because you see one good short and you're like, oh, I actually want to know this. And you see that, and then you end up just whoop, 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 whoop forever. There's too much chatter going on, and I don't have the same focus and clarity that I once had. So I'd like to get that back. So I haven't watched any shorts in like 2 or 3 days, but I also want to really just lower screen time in general and of any source. I even considered deleting YouTube, but I think that's a bit of a rash decision to make. It's just too beneficial as long as it kind of goes. Like I've talked in the past about self-control and self-belief that comes from keeping whatever addictive source, keeping it right next to you. And because then you have to build the willpower to resist that thing instead of just removing it. I think that if you're so far down that you can't help yourself but indulge in these things, then it does help to remove it from your environment. But I don't think I'm quite there, so I'm gonna just will my way through this bad boy. And also with this clarity of mind that has somewhat left, I thought maybe the intake of nicotine was too high. You know, I've been doing these pouches, and obviously like I've tried to keep it to just work, but it does kind of invade the rest of the day. But I think I'm gonna just go one by one here because I don't want to change 3 different things and then something gets better and I don't know what it is. And then it kind of removes the whole premise of, you know, mathematically gauging all the inputs and how much they affect my state of being. So I'm gonna wait on the nicotine. Obviously, deep in my mind, I'm like, oh, maybe that's just because you're so addicted that you can't give it up. But I'm gonna forego that belief for a moment and just focus on these other things. And then if it's still, the problem persists, then I'll do that and either just focus on changing the doses, or probably changing the doses, lowering the doses, and eventually taking a 3 to 6 week break or more and seeing how that goes. But does work really well for workflow. So we're going to keep that for now and just focus on removing other input. Also, I'll get into more in a bit, but there's some habits that I want to install that I think would also kind of curb these negative effects that I have on my cognitive function as a whole. I recorded the last weekly update and then I re-recorded it because there were some things that I forgot to include. And while I did so, I noticed that again I talk about like, oh, it's been kind of a shifty time, so I've stopped going to the gym and focusing on my diet and stuff to just focus on moving in. And I went to bed one night and I was just thinking about, I feel like I've recorded that same message at least 5 times. And then, kind of going back through the history of recent history of my life, I definitely do this. I definitely, every single time that there is an option or an available opportunity for me to go back into degeneracy, excuse me, I do it readily. And I always see it as like, oh, I'm not going to get an opportunity like this again. But if I've recorded it 5 times, then it happens very often, right? At least like once a quarter to maybe even once a month. And I was just thinking about, why do I do that? Why does that even make sense logically to do that? And I came to some somewhat, not necessarily startling or earth-shaking recognition of patterns, but it was like, yeah, that does make sense. Where, I don't want to share too much about my personal history. I'll save that for much, much later down this road. But I didn't have a whole lot of positive role models growing up. And in fact, mainly I had anti-models, which I would love to record a video on how I think that that's beneficial in its own way. I don't know if I can say equally beneficial or more beneficial, but pretty much all I had were role models, anti-models that showed me what not to do, and that gave me a direction for where to go in the future. And one of these being one of the primary individuals who's supposed to be a role model was someone who every single time that something would be going good and our lives would be improving at this person's hand, they would destroy it. They would destroy it all. They would bring it all down, and then we would fall well below where we were. And so I was just looking at the trajectory of my life since I have been in control of it. And it's like I have these ups where, I'm somewhere and I desire better for my life. I increase and I increase and I increase, and then I get to a point where I'm somewhat comfortable and I take one of these breaks, and then I go downhill, not below where the original baseline was, but I stay there for a while and I exist there, and then I want more from life, and then I go back up. And so you see the trend here that persists over time where I'm continuously getting better, but I'm lengthening the time span for no discernible logical reason. And I think that having a partner who is of a growth mindset really helps to lock in a position where I can't go below there, but still this drop happens consistently, and it's just so volatile. I've just noticed that my habits are so volatile, and I don't want that. I don't want that for my life. And recognizing this pattern of my past and that I've definitely inherited from my previous inputs is still infecting my life, and that's a pattern that I definitely have to get rid of, where for some reason deep within my subconscious I have this belief that when things are going good, that's when you let off the gas, and that's when it's okay to let yourself ruin things. And it doesn't make any sense. I mean, imagine the trajectory, the point that I would be at now if I was just at a continuous upward slope, right? And of course there's always some volatility in life, but it's never purely linear. But I can keep it much closer to the straight up narrow line if I just stayed foot on the gas, right? Even, just a coast at 30 miles an hour instead of going to 100 and then back down to 30 and then back to 100 and then to 5 and then, all this stuff. Just decreasing the volatility would definitely have a much more positive impact, and I can get a lot further, and then I can allow the volatility of life itself to impact these things rather than my own lack of effort, I guess. So that's something that I've kind of realized, and I definitely need to dig deep and remove this internal belief that I have to do this, because I obviously don't. And not only do I obviously don't, it makes no sense why I should. And so, that's something that has to be changed in the future. And, we're working on it. But I think that's, kind of important to look at your past and see how, especially in the early formative years of your life, certain beliefs were installed or programmed into your subconscious that need to be changed. And I've talked about, repenting for the sins of those before us in a past video, but it's constantly true. It's constantly true. So that's something that's been ever present over the last couple days since I made that realization. Started reading fiction. I mentioned that I started and finished Dan Brown's Inferno. That was, it was all right. He's not like the greatest ever, but he's, decent, good stories. But then after that, I have picked up and started reading the first Game of Thrones book, and it is brilliant. Literally from the first page, I'm hooked. It's like the greatest thing, one of the greatest things I've ever read. Just in terms of structure and storytelling and metaphors that are so well hidden within the text. It's subtle enough to where you could miss it if you weren't paying attention, but if you're just paying a little bit of attention, it's so obvious, and it draws you so much closer to the story and to the characters and to everything that's going on. It's pretty brilliant. That guy knows what he's doing. I'm pretty much, I think 7 to 10 chapters into the first book, so we have a long road ahead of us. See you in 7 years when I finish. Just kidding, it should take me probably a year and a half if I'm constant with it. But, I wanted to pick up another book after Inferno, and I look at my shelf, which is mainly nonfiction. I just couldn't bring myself to do it. And also I've been wanting to read more fiction anyways because, I have a series of books that I have planned for the future. Well, one book mainly that I hope will branch into a 3 to 5 book series, but we'll see how that goes. But I would just want to read more fiction so that I can get a better idea of what good writing looks like so that I can achieve something, of a higher level than whatever, low level stuff, right? And just a break from information and allowing my mind to think about realities that don't have to be so close to this one. And, what if life was like this? What if life was like this? And imagining, different scenarios if the rules for existence were just slightly different, right? Or maybe very similar, but the setting was very different. And I think that's going to help a lot with creative endeavors in the future. And so, I don't want to give up nonfiction reading, obviously, but I'd like to balance it out. And I've talked in the past about having 2 books open at one time, one fiction, one non. But I need to, create some kind of schedule for that makes sense with my day-to-day schedule. So that to come in the future. Personally, back on diet, back on gym, full-time, regained abs. I see abs as kind of like a supplementary routine. Like I don't include that in basic training, the muscle groups as a whole, and that's pretty much it. I don't include cardio, I don't include abs, but now I've added abs back in. I do that every other day, which I've seen the most results from when I was doing it every day, because I've heard you can train core every day because it's so used to being worked all the time that you still see growth. But I noticed that I have faster observable growth when I take a day in between. And so that's what my schedule is now. Habits to implement in the near future. So I've gotten most of what I was doing back, but I want to re-implement the devoted study periods of in-depth learning where I'm actively taking notes and interacting with whatever knowledge I'm taking in, and just to kind of deepen the grasp that it has, or my grasp on the concepts, and re-include running and cardio, because I think that I'm experiencing some limits on my cognition just because of lung capacity. Like I'm not getting enough oxygen to the brain and body to facilitate clear thought. Obviously I'm not scatterbrain all the time, but there's always upper levels, and I think that when I was actively running all the time with sports and stuff like that in my earlier years, that there's some very obvious benefits. And so we're going to have to get back into that. And then something new, I guess I've already said, more structured reading, and then meditation I'm thinking within the next few days to the next week or so, I'm going to start doing that, and every day, making it a, kind of like a cold shower practice, which also I'd like to employ as well, but not on the slate yet. Take things a little slow, make sure they stick, right? So I want to do that, and hopefully that'll curb some negative effects of too much input. Like if I spend that much time devoted to only myself and knowing myself, then I'll be able to experience more input and not have such negative consequences. And then also just as a visualization practice, because I've talked before about how good I used to be about visualizing and constructing in my mind as if it was right in front of me, and how well that ports over to like actually building things and creating things with my hands. So a day of visual training mainly, and then a day of deep internal observation and mindfulness and things like that to just improve my state of being a little bit and not be so dependent on positive circumstances to be in a good state of being, right? So that's what we got slated. I don't know, we gotta fix our schedule on the wall over there. You can see it right there. Got a little wiped off in the move, but I gotta fix that a little bit, and then we'll get things rolling again. The other thing I want to structure is time for play. You know, like I last night hopped on Xbox for the first time and played around for a couple hours, and it was awesome. It was awesome. It's great to socialize a little bit. It's great. You know, I've read and listened a little bit to how important play is for the mind. You know, just a time where there's low stakes and you're just having fun, and the release that comes from that, and you know the energy that can siphon back into other endeavors. And so I've been wanting to do this for a long time, but I just need to kind of come up with a schedule for that, where like certain days of the week it's like totally cool if I want to hop on and play for 5 hours at a time, you know, with my buddies. I want to do that in the future just so that I can stay up to speed with, you know, friends that have been my friends for my entire life, and then, you know, maybe some new friends as well. Plus just having fun with the game, dude, you know, like just relaxing a little bit. To come, not necessarily today, not necessarily tomorrow, but it's on the slated agenda for the coming days and weeks and months. So something that I haven't really made public on here, but I would like to talk about more in the future, is dreams, because that's something that I pay very close attention to. I've always been someone that has extremely vivid dreams, and after observing, because not to give too much away, but that's something that the book that I plan on writing primarily revolves around, is theories about the concept of dreams and where they come from and what they mean. And as far as I understand, there's not a whole lot of real science that's been done on the origin of dreams and where they come from and where they stem from and what they mean, and drawing meaning from them. And so I kind of like to give my own thoughts on that through a sort of science fiction novel series. You know, when I pay attention to dreams, I notice the mechanics of them, and I see how they work, and I see rules of that reality that weren't apparent before. Like, for example, I've had dreams where I interact with characters in a new setting, time and place, space, whatever, and I re-encounter characters from past dreams, and I recognize them from them, and I say, hey, I know you from when we did this thing together. There was a dream that I had where I was basically whitewater rafting, or I was in a competition where we had to create a raft that made it down a stretch of river, and my partner in that was someone that I had previously gone on a similar adventure with, a guy with long hair, and well, that's kind of all that I got on him right now, but I've never seen that before, or at least I've never registered it before, that there are characters that can exist in different points in my dreaming sequences throughout time, right? Like this person I could have had a dream with years ago, and they crop back up, right? And very interesting, right? And then this past one, that over the last 3 days I've been having pretty much the same style of dream, which is, you know, I don't know enough about quantum physics or anything like that, but I've read a little bit, and especially dealing with like possible realities and how they intertwine with our own. And, you know, this is kind of verging on science fiction, given that I don't have like real facts or data in front of me. But basically in this dream sequence, I could observe that I was in a tunnel of my own reality, of my own structure, of my own stream of consciousness. and I'm laying next to my partner, and I can see hers next to me in close proximity because she physically is close to me, and I can pick things out of her reality, of her dream sequence, of her stream of consciousness, and port them into my own, basically creating a hole, a tear in the lining of my reality through mine to hers, and then retrieve things through there. And then in the following dreams, the last 2 nights have been something with that same concept. We're not necessarily with another's stream of consciousness, but essentially where the potential realities that exist are created in a realm of possibility, where as soon as I imagine a scenario, or I imagine an item, or I imagine a place that doesn't exist, it is now, in theory, created an alternate reality that does exist, even if it's only in the realm of possibility, right? So as if I've imagined it, it must exist somewhere. And so then in these dreams, I would imagine a reality, or I would imagine an item in a reality that exists. So say some gold coin that has a very specific insignia on it. And then I can imagine it, and now that it has been created in some space, it then appears in an alternate stream, an adjacent stream to my own, and then I can open this portal and retrieve it, usually through some telekinetic process, right? Because even in the dreams, I was very cautious about sticking my arm or any appendage through the tear, because I don't know when it's going to close. And, kind of like in Avengers when they just chop that fucker's arm off because he sticks it through the Doctor Strange's wormhole. I didn't, I don't know how well mastered I have this ability to open the portals there, and so I didn't want to stick my hand through. But, retrieving the things nonetheless by bringing them forth with the conscious effort of my mind. So that will probably make it into the book somehow. How, I don't know, but try to keep this vague enough so that it doesn't give anything away, because I'm pretty excited about that series. But that's about all I got, ladies and gentlemen. Let me know what you think. Let me know what's going on with you. Let me know, if anything I'm saying is helping, or if anything I'm saying is dumb as shit. Let me know. I don't care. We'll have the discussion, right? So that's kind of where we'll leave it. And with that, I will say, Nick out.